And welcome to another edition of Quoth the Raven, Lewis Brightraven. I'm your host, Lewis Brightraven, 28-year veteran of comics, science fiction, fantasy, horror, and role-playing games as a writer, illustrator, and editor. Today is book 25, or day 25 of Booktober 2020, where we do book reviews, comics reviews every day of the month for the month of October. We're doing 3 different books today, so let's go ahead and get started. With back issue 122 from Tomorrow's Publishing. It's $9.95 cover price. Various writers and artists involved. It's a historical review and interviews magazine. It's released in late September, early October of 2020. And what it's about, this issue of Back Issue Magazine celebrates the 40th anniversary of the new Teen Titans, co-created by Marv Wolfman and George Perez back in 1980. There are 75 pages of articles and interviews with tributes to both creators. Excuse me, it's just a second. I'm going to have to take my cat. Always wants to start trouble right when I'm starting the show. Okay, anyway, 75 pages of articles and interviews with tributes to both creators, a countdown of what Back Issue thinks are the top 40 moments in Teen Titans history, a George Perez art gallery segment, a look back at the character histories of Starfire and Raven, a look back at the character The Protector, who wasn't an ad campaign character that was tied into the Titans franchise briefly, humorous cartoons about the Titans, and more. It's a must-have for Titans fans, but if you're not into the franchise, unless you're a fan of comics history, maybe this isn't for you. I give it 5 out of 5 stars. I am a Titans fan, or I should say I'm a former Titans fan. I'm a fan of that era of Titans anyway. So not much to really show. If you're familiar with George Perez, you can see the art that is Perez on the cover. Going through different articles is not that big of a deal. Like I said, it's basically for Titans fans mostly. Our next book is The Futurians, number 1. Published in 1985. It was $1.50 cover price from Lodestone Comics. The writer, penciler, creator was Dave Cockrum. The inker is Ricardo Villagrán with colors Patty Cockrum. Yes, that is Patty, not Patty. Genre is superhero. Again, released in 85. And what it's about is a group of 8 extraordinary humans with powers gained by way of genetic manipulation from the future, an extremely advanced future society called the Terminus, who has attempted to alter the past by sending genetic information back through time to give certain human beings superpowers and the compulsion to use them in order to enable them to stop some unnamed disaster. In the late 20th century, a future inhabitant known only as Vandervecken, or the Dutchman, both names for a Flying Dutchman, downloaded his mind into the body of a hobo, or homeless person, however you want to put it. But, this is the 80s. They call them hobos, not homeless, who later becomes the owner of the Future Dynamics Corporation. And this individual then begins gathering up those who had been altered and given powers to train them for what would be a variety of epic confrontations against a variety of foes. Cockrum started this series as a Marvel graphic novel in 1983. He was supposed to do the series with Marvel at the Epic imprint in the 80s, but he was seduced away by Lodestone, who promised pie-in-the-sky money. Exactly how much that means, but that's how Cockrum described it. The result was this is the first of only 3 issues that were published of the series. Attorney collected the graphic novel and the 3 issues in 1987, so there's another edition. In 95, Cockrum did an issue 0 try to relaunch the series under his own imprint, Aardwolf, but he tragically passed away before the series could really get underway again. This is one of comics' saddest lost stories. That being said, The first issue here is very hard to find. If you haven't read the Marvel graphic novel, then you're going to be a bit lost as to what all's going on, who the characters are, etc. So on that point, I really have to give this book this particular issue a low score. As far as the concept, the character designs, Cochran was a masterful character designer, not just with the Futurians. I mean, you can see there's kind of like a Phoenix character called Star Swift that's flying on the high left there. But this is the guy who created Nightcrawler and designed Colossus and designed Storm and stuff like that. So you get an idea that he knows what he's doing. But the characters are still, even though you're dropped smack in the middle of the story, it's engaging enough to keep audiences interested. My advice, however, is to seek out the original Marvel graphic novel for the origin story, which I've given you what the cover looks like here. And then the 1987 Eternity collected the rest of the story before the 95 edition. And I give you the ISBN numbers. The first one I should give you, I have them upside, I have them inverted. I don't know why, but the Marvel graphic novel is 978-0-9397-668-1-9, I think is how it's supposed to be. And then the Eternity collection, which collects the single issues, is 978-0-9447-350-1-5. For the whole series, I give it a 4 out of 5. For this particular issue, I give it a 3 out of 5 because, well, if I compare it to what comics are today, it's pretty standard. You're always walking into comics that you're in the middle of a story, you're trying to figure out what's going on, and the writers don't give it to you. But if I was to say I got this in 85, it probably would have disappointed me because I didn't have enough of a story to know what was going on in the backstory in the first issue by itself. Let's look at some of the art for the book first. Again, this is Dave Cockrum with Ricardo Villagrán inks and P.D. Cockrum colors. I think it looks pretty nice. Here, the characters are looking. They've gone to New York, which has been hit by a nuclear blast or something like that, and most of the city is just decimated. Hundreds of millions of people, hundreds of thousands to millions of people killed. They've come because the female with the red hair, Mosquito, her family's from there, and she wants to try and find her family. And so they go to her place where she used to live, and they found the wreckage, and there's nobody around, but there's blood all over in the other room, so she thinks everybody's dead. And it cuts to soldiers that are also hunting, or not hunting, but trying to find survivors in the blast. They get attacked by that alien creature type thing. I'll let you know what it is in a minute. They think that her whole family's gone. They need to go check out other places, so they leave, and then find out her sister's actually there under the rubble, and they left her behind. They go back to their plane to find out the plane has been completely destroyed, and then it cuts back. This is a little bit later. Two other superheroes that aren't members of their team get attacked by this alien. Black Mane and Mosquito run to try and help them, and then they find out that here's this. They're not really aliens. They're some sort of centipede monsters that live underneath the earth, but nasty little buggers. And that's how they end it for this issue. And finally, for today, we have JADEMAN Kung Fu Special #1 for $1.50 cover price. The publisher is JADEMAN Comics. The creator, writer, artist is Tony Wong and friends, but it's credited to Tony Wong. English scripts translations are by Mike Barron. The genre is martial arts and Eastern mysticism, and it was originally released in 1988. And what it's about, this book is a 64-page introduction to 4 different series that JADEMAN Comics would later release as separate titles: Oriental Heroes, The Blood Sword, Drunken Fist, and The Force of Buddha's Palm. It's interesting to look at, and I think had I seen these books back in the late 1980s or early 1990s instead of now, they would have had an influence on my own martial arts comic from the 90s, Ryo Shindo, Komodo the Dragon. But I didn't see these until recently, so they didn't. It's recommended for ages 15 up. I give it 3.5 stars. Let's take a look at some of the artwork. And, I say Tony Wong and friends. Tony was the guy who did the base rough pencils, base character designs for the stories, but he had a lot of art assistants. This is Japanese comics. A lot of them were done this way, were studios. The guy who has the lead concepts, the credited artist, while all the other assistants don't get credited in the book. I'm not too keen on that, but it is what it is. But this is from the Oriental Heroes segment. And it's kind of interesting. The coloring is done in a lot of different ways. There's watercolor, there's crayon, colored pencils, as you can kind of see. This backdrop from top left panel is done in colored pencils, crayons for the backdrop against the coloring. It's very interesting to look at this stuff because it gives a different atmospheric quality to it. Different types of pencils and print technique again. This is still, I think this is the second story, The Blood Sword, the character introductions. And then this is the Drunken Fist segment, the introduction to the characters, where it takes place, who the characters are. Some more of the characters. I do like some of the anatomical structure for the men, for the muscularity. It would have played well into what I was doing back then. Would have helped my anatomy a lot back then. Because, there's enough feathering and hatchwork in this that it would have played into the Bern Perez style that I was emulating back then. And this is the Palm Buddha Strike pages. You can see a lot of this stuff in the 80s was, with these comics was still very much the same kind of stuff that would later become popular in manga stuff like Dragon Ball Z and Pokemon and Power Rangers and all that stuff. It was always there even before all that stuff came out and became popular here in America. One of the more fascinating elements of this book is that they also give the history of the creator, Tony Wong, and his career in Japan between each of these preview stories. So it's kind of like looking at a Japanese version of one of the Image founders, only 20 years earlier. And like I said, the reason I added and friends is because, of course, in Japan with the studios, Wong had a lot of assistant artists to keep his books on schedule. And they aren't credited, which was and is the custom in Japanese manga, though that has been getting challenged more in recent times. I want to see what I did with the actual issue. I thought I had it right nearby. Mm-hmm. Okay. I had put it somewhere else. So anyway, this is the actual issue, and I kind of wanted to show kind of how annoying it is in a way. I mean, here's some more of the watercolor type stuff, covers for Oriental Heroes, which would be nice. This is a pullout that introduces you to Tony Wong and explains how he does some of the basic layouts, and then he has all these assistants, and they're doing the inking and the coloring and everything. In Japan, he has this whole giant mega company in Japan. And remember, this is in '88, 4 or 5 years before Image started, and he'd already been doing it for like 15 years at that level. But I mean, yeah, here, let me entice all you kids into thinking you're going to be stars. Here I am with my $500,000 Ferrari. You want to convince kids that comics are going to make them money someday if they work in comics? That's how you do it, folks. So yeah, I think that's probably what inspired some of the Image guys a little bit. So I thought that was kind of amusing. Anyway, but comics will break your heart, kids. It doesn't work that way as a rule. But anyway, those are our books for today. Tomorrow's books will be Lost Transmissions, The Secret History of Science Fiction and Fantasy, which is a collection of essays and discussions about lost history of well, it's not so much lost history, just stuff that people should know about but mostly don't, about science fiction and fantasy history. And The Irregulars, which is basically the kids that serve Sherlock Holmes. That's a nice little graphic novel. And Comic Effect number 22 is another magazine that has a lot of articles in it, and just so happens to have something I wrote in it. Yesterday I was asked during my live draw about where some of the stuff you can find some of my work in would be, so I figured I'd pull something out that you might be able to find relatively easy. So that will be tomorrow's reviews. If you want to reach me, you can reach me on Facebook at Lewis.BrightRaven, deviantart.com/BrightRaven, on YouTube at Quoth the Raven, Lewis Brightraven. You can email me questions at quoththeravenlbr72@gmail.com, or Yahoo at lewisbrightraven@yahoo.com. The regular weekly broadcast for the podcast is Thursdays evenings at 9 p.m. Eastern. We will have another show in about an hour or so, which will be a live draw episode, continuing the sketches from yesterday with the pumpkin sketch cards. We're doing some coloring and finalizing inking and stuff like that. And if I have time, I will do pencils for another sketch as well. Possibly, I'm not sure which character yet. I got a number of them that are broken down into blue line preliminaries. So we'll see what happens then. Okay. So I'll see you guys at 3 p.m. Eastern back here on Facebook and YouTube for the live draw. Okay. Have a good day, and I'll see you guys in a little while.